Welcome, dear learners. This lecture has been developed based on the interdisciplinary social sciences point of view. It has been classified into 10 segments to be discussed. They are introduction, books and articles, recommended sources, communalism, the term communalism, definition, India's challenge to communalism, its secularism, colonial fruit versus secularism, fruit versus freedom movements fruit, process of consolidation of communalism, the ideology, resistance to communal ideology and the process and so on. Shall we now go to the topic? Dear learners, let us know about what is communalism. To have a proper understanding of the ideology, communalism is the need of the hour. All over the world, the communal forces are gaining power. Communalism as an ideology is fast taking root in the international community. A statement that you are communal in today's world is nowhere near to positive connotation. It is used in the derogative sense. It means that person is either fundamental or even bordering to racist tendencies. The ideology closely associated with fundamentalism or racism is and will be a threat to any peaceful society. Such an ideology needs to be resisted. The resistance begins with the understanding of the dangerous ideology. This series of lecture will help the students to get clearer ideas about communalism as an ideology and its presence and history in the Indian society and what needs to be done to resist it in India. Some books and articles as recommended sources. There are many research articles and books, but for this course, the essential readings materials would be Bipin Chandra wrote about Communalism, a primer, and again he has wrote Communalism in Modern India. The another important work done by Louis Dumont, Religion, Politics and History in India as a collected essays. The next work, Communalism and Ramakatha in Historical Perspective, which was written by Anil Kumar Tyagi, T.K. Uman, on the varieties of communalism in India. Communalism, the term. Let us begin with the term communalism itself. Sociologists consider that the term arose from the word community. The term community itself is used in three different senses. They are, first, community as a territorial entity. For instance, we can speak of a village community or an urban community. Second, community as a group of people who share something in common. Here we talk of the sense of we feeling among the people. For instance, we the Muslims, we the Buddhists, we the Parsis, etc. Third, community as a partial social system, as a part of wider system. In this sense, if society is considered a wider entity, then the community would be considered a part of it. Furthermore, we can enunciate it thus: if India is the wider system, any linguistic or a religious community would be a part of that wider system. The next important segment is definition about the communalism. Communalism is defined by Bipin Chandra in the words: communalism is the belief that because a group of people follow a particular religion, they have as a result common social, political and economic interests. Simply put, the Christian or a Muslim community, any religious community for that matter, will not just share the common religious interests, but each religious community also will share common non-religious interests such as political, economic, social and cultural interests. T.K. Uman would define it as communalism is the tendency on the part of a religious group or collectivity to affirm that it is a political entity. That is, communalism obtains when a religious group believes that unless it has an exclusive political roof, the group cannot have a secure existence. Communalism believes in the dictum of one culture, religion and one polity. India's challenge to communalism, the secularism. The Indian situation is different. India is a country with many religions. Preference of one religion over another will bring in many challenges and create a kind of unrest in the already existing peaceful society. India needed another ideology to sustain itself and thus to challenge the ideology of communalism. The ideology suitable for India was as well as is the ideology of secularism. Secularism means separations of state, politics and other non-religious areas life from religion and religion being treated as a purely personal matter, writes Bipin Chandra. This is the definition derived from the Western mode of thought. This holds true for Indian situation too. But India, unlike the West, is a country with many religions. Out of this diversity arises another specific feature of secularism in India. The state must be dissociated from any kind of religion and it should be neutral towards all religions. People of different religious beliefs utter the same definition in these words. State should have equal regard for all religions. Secularism in the Indian context was never against the religions. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said secularism in India, secularism does not obviously mean a state where religion as such is discouraged. It means freedom of religion and conscience, including freedom of those who may have no religion. It means free play of all religions subject only to their not interfering with each other or with basic conceptions of our state. If communalism organized everything under the religion, secularism separated the state and religion. In secularism, religion was relegated to a personal matter. In communalism, religion was considered as a determinant factor in everything. Religion was not just a personal matter. It was first and foremost a deciding factor in the political front and in the social, cultural and economic fronts as well. The next segment is communalism, colonial fruit versus secularism, freedom movement's fruit. British colonial rule is accused of bringing in the communalistic tendencies in the Indian subcontinent. It was for their selfish motive to sustain power in India and to weaken the unity of the Indians, especially after the first war independence in 1857. The British, as part of their divide and rule policy, introduced the communalistic tendencies. They did this with their writings, especially with their writings of Indian history. The history books penned by the British divided the Indian history into three periods: Hindu period, Muslim period and British period. Such a division of history indirectly presented Hindus and Muslims as different nationalities. Hindu period was portrayed as the period of uncivilized outlook. Hindus were portrayed as backward and inimical to any development. The Muslim period was presented as the difficult period for the Hindus. This was the period in which Hindu temples were razed and Hindus were yoked and unjust taxes and laws. Any act of vandalism of Hindu temples by the Muslim rulers was purposefully emphasized, and any war between a Hindu ruler and Muslim ruler were given religious colors and were exaggerated. This sharpened the division between the Hindus and Muslims. Thanks to the introduction of the communalistic tendencies, the British succeeded and the Indian society got divided based on the religious differences. During the Indian freedom movement, there was the need to unite Indians notwithstanding the differences of caste, language and creed. When the British indicated the path of divisions in the form of communalism, the Indian freedom movement sought to unite them as Indians. It was at this juncture that they proposed secularism as the right model for the Indian society marked by the existence of many religions. Secularism in this sense was then and even now is perceived as the best weapon against the ideology of communalism. Process of consolidation of communalism, the ideology. The communalism is basically an ideology. By ideology, what we mean is that it is a belief system or interrelated assumptions through which polity or society is viewed. Communalism is, in other words, a way of looking at politics and society, and communalism is politics organized around that ideology. The communalist ideology and agents continuously feed the ideas of communalism to the ordinary citizens. As an ideology, it is slowly but steadily made to take root in the thought patterns of people. Every medium is used for it. The process is a slow and a long standing one, but the final result would be very favorable for the communalists. Once the idea has taken root in the mind of a person, it begins to grow unhindered. It is not easy to uproot what had been planted. It now becomes part of the person's thinking process. We can call it communal thinking. When communal thinking takes hold of many, the impact would be frightening. There are many examples in the history. For instance, we can cite the well-known example of Adolf Hitler. The racist ideology of Nazism was already laid out in Hitler's autobiography Mein Kampf, much before he captured the political power. People who thought that Hitler just wanted the political power realized only much later how dangerous his ideology was. But then it had already been laid out and was spread among the ordinary people. The communal thinking emerged much earlier and spread like a wildfire unseen. And when the time was ripe, Hitler harvested it. Another example is the speeches of Muhammad Ali Jinnah post 1937. His speeches then focused on Muslim communalism. It was ignored as not that influential, but then the final result is well-known fact of the partition of United India. Resistance to communal ideology, the process. How can we resist the communal ideology? What are we to do? The first step is to know about communalism as an ideology. The next step is to find whether the nation is in the grip of communalism. If so, we need to find out what sort of communalism that has raised its vicious tentacles on our nation. Having identified it, the process by which it had taken root in the common society should be identified. The ideologies should be identified then. This process is called education and communalism. Having identified all such details and the processes, the counter strategies are to construed and constructed. All that we gained in the education about communalism should be passionately transferred to the people under the communal thinking and to ordinary people. Bipin Chandra gives the answer in an elaborate manner. He writes, it literally means bringing out the different elements that constitute communal ideology or belief system and educating the public about the real nature and content of communalism. Above all, it means bringing home to the people the falsity of communal assumptions, communal logic and communal answers. It means enabling the people through patient analysis to see that what the communalists project as the societal problems are not the real problems, that communal analysis of society, culture, history and politics faulty, and consequently what they put forward as answers are not the answers to real problems, that the communalists not only give the wrong answers, they also raise the wrong questions. Dear learners, so far we have dealt with communalism as an overview to look into the deeper. We have seen general outline of communalism as an introduction and some books as a recommended sources: Communalism, the term, Communalism definition, India's challenge to communalism, secularism, Communalism as a colonial fruit versus secularism, freedom movement's fruit, process of consolidation of communalism, the ideology, resistance to communal ideology, the process. I hope you all must have enjoyed this session and it may have enriched the knowledge and overview about communalism. Dear learners, we will meet with another schedule. Thank you. All the best. Communalism 1. Dear learners, before we conclude this lecture, I would like to add another point to this lecture. This is about the differences between communalism is an ideology and communalism violence. Communalism and communal violence. At this juncture, it is good to remember that one should not confuse communalism with communal violence. Communal ideology or communalism usually leads to communal violence and riots. But communalism is the primary and cause of the communal violence. Violence or riot is usually the consequence of communal ideology. Communal violence is actually an episodic consequence of the prior spread of communal ideology, a concrete manifestation and product of the prior communalization of the people, of the poisoning of the people's mind through the spread of communal belief system, so that the pettiest of the happenings sparks a communal outburst. It is important to keep in view that communal ideology can prevail without violence, but communal violence can seldom take place without prior spread of communal ideology. The advantage of communal violence for the communalists is that the communal violence acts as a means of spreading communal ideology hothouse fashion. But under no circumstances should one equate communal violence and communal ideology. Communal violence is not the heart of communalism. Communal violence is of course a consequence of the spread of communal thinking, but it is not the crux of the communal situation. Communal ideology cannot only exist but grow and prevail for decades and yet not take the form of violence. The response to communal ideology and communal violence is also different. Eradication of communal ideology is a slow and a long standing process. On the other hand, communal violence requires an immediate answer. The answer has to be given by state by using effective provisions given by the law. The state alone can suppress communal violence and shorten the time span of a riot, as also reduce the damage it does to life and property. The communal violence has to be immediately dealt with by the state. The reason is firstly it contains the barbarism, but the important reason is that any communal violence actually abuts the fire of spread of communal ideology. The objective of the communal violence is the spread of communal ideology. Also, communal violence helps in segregating the people into the two categories. Communal violence targets a group and paints it with negative shades. The simmering of hatred is thus maintained and two communities are permanently separated from each other. One will consider the other as its enemy always. This will result in social unrest, and that does not sound good for the development of the state. It is the responsibility of the state to douse the fire of communal violence. This should be followed by the patient conscientization or strengthening of the public, both the communalized and common public. This should be the duty of political parties, cultural workers and other voluntary groups. Dear learners, I hope you all must have enjoyed this session and it may have enriched the knowledge and overview about communalism, and we will meet with another schedule. Thank you. All the best.